The Apollo series of medical ships in Star Citizen currently offer the pinnacle of ship-based medical facilities to players, and with recent updates to medical, as well as engineering gameplay on the horizon for the future, this kind of ship promises a lot for group gameplay. But for everything currently in-game, there's also plenty of gameplay that still needs to be delivered for a ship like the Apollo, which prompts the question, how does the ship currently perform in-game? I'm Forrester, and this video will review the currently flyable Apollo Triage, which is described on the Star Citizen website as a medical ship. If you've seen other ship reviews on this channel, then this review format may be familiar. It's split into 5 sections, starting with a ship tour, assessing combat performance, reviewing handling and visibility, looking at the operating costs and profitability, before finally summarising. As always, I've included timestamps in the video description in case you want to skip ahead, and if you're one of the many people watching who isn't yet subscribed to the channel, you might consider it, not least so you can keep up to date when new ship reviews like this drop. And this review of the Apollo Triage is based on performance in Star Citizen Alpha 4.3. And we'll start with a brief external tour approaching from the starboard side. Moving to the front of the Apollo is an elevator flanked by either side of the pilot armament. There's a button to call the elevator down, which is an entry point into the cockpit of the ship, but we'll come back to that shortly. Moving around to the port side of the ship, the very striking red paint scheme is immediately obvious, and then we'll move round to the rear, which is the second access point to the Apollo. There's a button which deploys a ramp which can be used to head up into the rear of the ship, which is where the medical section is. This ramp is wide enough for a gurney, but because of the door here, the vehicles that might otherwise fit up can't fit into the rear of the ship. When the door is closed, the docking collar is visible, which hints to potential future uses of the ship, but at the moment it's just the ramp. It's worth adding this is an airlocked space which preserves the atmosphere of the ship by locking one door at a time. Entering into the rear section of the Apollo, we enter the foyer or the triage section. Plenty of open space before entering into the cargo bays on either side. There's a storage grid, as well as a weapons locker, and component access hidden behind a panel on the wall. There's also space for armor storage. Across on the port side of the ship is a mirrored layout with another cargo bay and cargo grid. More components hidden behind a panel, and also an engineering terminal. Then, amidships on both port and starboard side are the 2 med bays. Shown here are the Tier 3 with 3 beds, but there are Tier 2 and Tier 1 bays available with varying numbers of beds. At the front of each of these sections is a patient bathroom. And then, without going into too much detail, here's a mirrored version of that same med bay. In between the foyer is a nice window looking out to the stars above. Then, a forward midships is an engineering section. Here is some component access behind the walls, including an engineering terminal. And then on the starboard side, some more component access. Then moving forward, we enter into the bridge and crew area of the Apollo. There's a seating area, a bunk on either side, as well as personal storage to access the ship inventory. On the starboard side is a small kitchen, as well as a small bathroom for the crew use, somehow a little bit less luxurious than the patient's bathroom. Then there's the elevator, which we saw earlier, where the rails can retract to open up the space a bit more. At the front is the pilot and the co-pilot seat. The Apollo pilot controls two size 4 weapons below the nose, defaulting to Rhino laser repeaters. There's also a remote turret on top of the ship, armed with two size 3 weapons, defaulting to M5A laser cannons. The remote turret can be controlled by a co-pilot where there is one, or alternatively slaved forward to pilot control in the absence of a second player. In most situations, having the pilot retain control of the remote turret is likely to be the best way to fight. The Triage is additionally armed with 8 size 2 missiles, which is a key differentiator to the medevac model. The launchers are fixed in and can't be swapped out for larger or smaller missile sizes. Defensively, the Apollo is equipped with 4 size 2 shield generators. Although there are 4 of them, size 2 feels a little small for a ship of this size, and so the shields drop quicker than might be expected. Accordingly, the Apollo is best used to jump into and out of fights as quickly as possible. The end result is a ship that hits harder than you might imagine, but also feels much more fragile than might be expected for a big ambulance. In terms of visibility from the front of the Apollo, it's fairly good, at least for an RSI ship at this size. The view to the front is largely clear, with some small struts off to the sides. Most helpfully, it's easy to look down and see below the ship, which is great for landings. Handling-wise, the Apollo feels heavy, and although it can pick up speed in a straight line, any kind of turn sees her drifting heavily. The SCM limiter sits at 170 meters per second, which is marginally slower than the medevac variant, and means it's easily outrun by smaller hostiles. Kicking up to nav modes increases the top speed to 1025 meters per second, which is actually faster than the medevac, so the Triage crosses distances somewhat quickly. The stock quantum drive is a little slow, however, which is perhaps not ideal for a ship that might need to respond quickly to emergencies and provide ambulance services. Swapping out the quantum drive is well facilitated by the generous fuel stores, however. Usually, the Triage is fairly cheaply operated, with refuel and repair in the low thousands. As with other ships, firing the missiles quickly adds to the bill, but the Apollo isn't a ship that regularly needs to do that. To make money with the Apollo is more challenging. There is a cargo grid of 32 SU total capacity split across the 2 side rooms. Each room has a grid measuring 2 units tall, 2 units wide, and 4 units long. There's also plenty of space off-grid in the Triage area at the back, but because the entry corridor is so narrow, it's difficult to bring crates on and off the ship, and the largest that will realistically fit is a 2 SCU crate, which rules out larger hauling contracts. But the grid is there and theoretically an option. Ship combat contracts can be feasible, especially at the medium threat type of level, but there are better choices out there for doing those contracts. And, in theory, it's possible to respond to medical beacons if players choose to deploy them. However, even when things go to plan, the payout is low, the cost of restocking medgel is high, and there's a strong risk that a beacon is either an ambush, or at the very least, there's a risky presence to be dealt with. Where the Triage fares a little better is as a bunker runner, using the medbeds as a respawn backup point, using internal storage and potentially the cargo grid to store looted items, and having a handy heal up. It would be even better if vehicles easily fit in the back, or if the shields were a bit heavier for tanking the defences a bit, but there we are. By way of upgrades, I'd swap out the quantum drive for something faster, like an XL1 or a Hurricane, just to cut down travel times, but otherwise I'd leave the rest as stock. Much like the medevac, the Triage is a good-looking ship inside and out. The default red paint is striking, the thrusters are distinctive, and inside the area feels clean and spacious. Much like the Mantis, it all has a bit of a Star Trek style to it. The long window between the medical bays makes a portrait of what's going on outside, And of course, it wouldn't be a medical ship without the emergency lights flashing. The Apollo comes with a variety of medical rooms to choose from, either 3 Tier 3 beds, 2 Tier 2 beds, or a single Tier 1 bed, giving pilots the choice of how they'd like to tailor their Apollo to respond to casualties. And that Tier 1 maximum is really a unique selling point for the Apollo versus other medical ships. There's also the usual facilities to be expected of a ship of this size, including beds for logging out, and even a couple of engineering terminals, one neatly hidden behind a panel. And whilst the Apollo does often fall into the large hangar category, it is a very comfortable fit to do so. The biggest challenges that the Apollo faces are what it can't do, or more precisely, what it can't do yet. Many players were excited for the drone functionality of the ship, which doesn't exist as of patch 4.3. And whilst there's a design document outlining the future of medical gameplay, what's currently in-game is a far cry off that, which makes answering distress beacons often a poor experience for both rescuer and rescuee. It also feels like a shame that the rear can't accommodate vehicles, as there is the space for it, just not an entrance wide enough to load or unload them. That said, there are situations where having the Tier 1 bed is useful in-game, particularly for groups doing FPS type content away from hospital beds. And the Triage does offer slightly better value than the Apollo Medevac, doing most of what its sibling does for a lower price. And on that topic of price, the Apollo Triage comes in at $250 to $280, which is on the more expensive side. At time of recording, as a newly released ship, there's no in-game purchase price yet. Is the Apollo Triage worth that price? To me, much like with the Medevac, the answer would be probably not, or at least not yet, unless you're a player who is all about medical gameplay in the state that it's currently in. As and when the ship becomes available for UEC, it could be a more interesting option to round out a fleet, depending on price, but that's a few patches away at time of recording. Or as medical gameplay becomes more fleshed out, again the Triage could become more meaningful, but for now I'd probably wait. But what do you think of the Apollo Triage? I look forward to reading your thoughts in the video comments. If you enjoyed this video, you might press the like button to help me understand what videos to make more of in future, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, you might like to do that too, so that YouTube knows to show you more videos like this in future. But otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.